I don't speak French, but I suffered through the English translated version of the Liberal leadership race's French debate. And to put it very simply, Mark Carney didn't do very well. And it's because he just has the weakest French of all four of the candidates on stage between himself, Chrystia Freeland, Karina Gould, and Frank Bayless. Frank Bayless obviously has the best French as he grew up in Montreal, and the rest of them are either from Ontario or Alberta or Northwest Territories in Mark Carney's case. So naturally, it wasn't that surprising that Mark Carney was going to have worse French. But how much worse? Well, I think Quebec could actually be in trouble with Mark Carney as the Liberal leader if he actually wins this entire thing. And that's still not a done deal. If you look at the polling, Mark Carney is still only like 10 points ahead of Chrystia Freeland. And in a rank ballot system, with more and more people getting to get a real good look at Mark Carney in these debates, there is a chance everything could tighten up quite a bit and that he loses on a third or fourth ballot. I still think right now, 90% chance Mark Carney wins. But for the Liberals to come out of this leadership race and get a big bump of support, it needs to be a Mark Carney coronation. It needs to be like when Pierre Poilievre ran in 2022. And even though he had tough opponents that if they were in different leadership races would have performed way better, he got like 69% of the vote. That's just not going to happen here. And here's one of the moments that I think proved why the man's not going to do great in a French debate against Pierre Poilievre. This was obviously just him saying something wrong, but the fact that you could say something this wrong is a problem.
Nous sommes d'accord avec Hamas, nous sommes d'accord avec une
Nous ne sommes pas d'accord avec Hamas.
He literally said, so we agree with Hamas, we agree with the two-state solution, and he was supposed to say, we all agree on Hamas, basically, that, Hamas cannot be left in charge of the Gaza Strip and all that much. The minutia of the foreign policy issue doesn't matter, but the fact that you could say it that backwards is a problem. I've talked to people who do speak French. They watch the debate in French, and they said that Mark Carney's French is decisively worse than everybody else's. They said in order of French proficiency, it would go obviously Frank Bayless, then Karina Gould, then Chrystia Freeland, and then Mark Carney. And the drop off between Freeland and Carney is a deep one. He's not a close fourth, he is a very distant fourth place. And again, a lot of this guy's growth in the polls, a lot of these polls I think are just not being run right. I don't think they're faking them. It's just that their methodology is a bit off. A lot of these polls show the growth in the Liberal Party support over the last few weeks has been in a large part around Quebec, as well as the Atlantic provinces, where in a certain ones like New Brunswick, French proficiency matters. So I don't think that Mark Carney is going to be as formidable as opponent as people think. And I think has been a bit of a grift in the online conservative media world where people act like Mark Carney's like a really, formidable opponent because you get to have more shock stories. But here was the CBC in French talking about Mark Carney just not being a very good candidate. Maybe I'll just quickly mute this and I'll just read it along for you guys. But here we go. You lose for the highlights. Was it a debate without sparks? Is this a debate that will go down in history for its political interest? Now he's talking, saying it was a debate that didn't have a lot of spark, and probably because everyone was in their second language, except Bayless, and obviously all eyes were on Mark Carney. I think he got a passing grade, but no more. We saw his French play tricks on him, the slip of the tongue in particular at one point when he said he agrees with Hamas. It took 3 minutes and it was picked up by the Conservatives, who attacked him on social media. He had difficulty making a place for himself in this debate. Some of these formations lacked correctness. He seemed to hesitate several times. The lines that worked to attack Pierre Poilievre, they seemed rehearsed. And I'm not sure that tonight Mr. Carney convinced that he is up to the standard of his real adversaries who are coming, Pierre Poilievre, Riz Francois Blanchette in a debate, for example. So hopefully that wasn't too horrific, me having to read an interview there, but I'm not French. You're probably not French. So this is how I'm going to have to do it. And even as somebody who doesn't speak French, watching the English translated debate, I could tell that Mark Carney did have to use a lot of rehearsed lines. When they were talking about Trump, it was horrifying to watch because every single time anyone spoke, but especially Mark Carney, people would be like, I know how to deal with Mr. Trump. I've been in politics for X amount of years, or I've been in business, or I've been in whatever. I know how to deal with a man like him. We have to be tough. And that's how you deal with a man like him. Like, it was complete vague garbage because obviously none of these people have actually ever negotiated a deal with somebody as tough as Trump. Most of them are middle management bureaucrats who have been in government too long, or they're corrupt businessmen like Frank Bayless, or they're central bankers like Mark Carney. These people have worked in worlds where every door is open for them because they are part of the corrupt establishment. The corrupt establishment card does not work when you're negotiated with the United States and Donald Trump. Honestly, the best answer on Trump, from a liberal perspective, I'm a conservative, I could care less about all these people. But from a liberal perspective, the person who had the best answer on dealing with Trump was probably Frank Bales, because he says, yeah, I'm not going to meet with Trump because I don't want him to basically be high-handed with me, and he gets to come to me if he wants to negotiate, or he can send his people to my people. Like, fine, that's smart. Everyone else was like, I'm going to go to Trump and stick my finger in his chest. Like, well, Trump's going to do to you what he did to Emmanuel Macron and other EU leaders, where he'll make them sit outside in the chairs outside of his office for 2 hours before he lets them in. He shows them how much he doesn't have to give a crap who they are. That's what will happen if you try and barge in his office like Mark Carney or Chrystia Freeland, trying to tell him what's up. It's not going to happen. Anyways, let's move on to some of the polling, just so you guys can see where this race is at. Luckily enough for me, some polling just came out from Main Street Research yesterday, asking actually 2,200 Liberal Party members what they think of the race. Ruby Dalla obviously is no longer on this poll after having been kicked out, but Mark Carney is only leading Chrystia Freeland by 12% right now. Chrystia is at 31, Mark Carney's at 43, Karina Gould's at 16, Frank Bayless is at 3, undecideds are at 7. My problem is if I quickly show you the charts over here, top line is Carney, then Gould, then Freeland, then Bayless. This is Quebec. Carney was ahead in Quebec, 40.7% of the vote. Next person, obviously, is Freeland with 33, then Karina, 13.8. Oddly enough, Frank Bayless is only at 2.8, even though he is a Quebecer. But the Google Trends charts, if you were following them last night or you saw anyone posting them, Frank Bayless was the main person being looked up. And I think for a lot of Quebec voters, for a lot of Quebec liberals, they're just going to look at if French was good, whose was terrible, and they'll just start marking people from 1 to 4 in terms of French proficiency. Because it would be like having a person with broken English running for an English party leadership. A lot of voters are just probably going to put that person last because they don't want somebody with an extremely heavy accent or actual broken grammar leading their party. And I think that is the problem that Mark Carney currently has himself in. He's just not a formidable opponent right now for Pierre Poilievre in Quebec. The Bloc might actually eat up a lot of Montreal with him in charge. Justin Trudeau was an abysmal leader, but he was a Quebecer, and that does help. Mark Carney is the guy you run if you're trying to run the downtown GTA. If you want to win downtown Victoria and Vancouver. But that's not where most of the voters are at. Sorry to tell people. Most voters tend to live in the other parts of the country where either they want you to know French or they want you to be like a small government conservative. So now Carney not having much pull in Quebec, not having much pull in northern New Brunswick, is going to have to get creative with where he's going to have a bunch of seat pickups or where he's even going to be defending seats. Good chance he ends up losing a lot of seats in this next election, even over what Justin Trudeau might have lost once all the skeletons start coming out of the closet. Because I've said multiple times, look at the man's actual record on policy, what he said, what he says, which people he looks up to. I've heard someone say in his book that they're reading, he actually does reference Marx in a positive light, which is why I think we should start calling the man Marx Carney. People will be like, oh, he's a central banker. Oh, he's an investment hedge fund partner. And it's like, it doesn't matter. You can be all those things and also be a radical leftist under the surface. A lot of the communist leaders in Russia and elsewhere in the world were very rich men before they jumped in to lead the country because, hey, that's a big power upgrade. Yeah, it might be bad for the economy, but they're already rich, so who cares? And I think of the conservatives, want to like hit this guy, that you need to open up on him on the radical things that he has said. Show every single stupid policy he's advocated for, every single stupid policy that the Trudeau government implemented that he recommended, what he says in his book, his advocacy for central bank digital currency, for carbon tax tariffs. It's stupid. Anyways, so I'll leave you guys there. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, do all that great stuff. I'm finally able to leave Cambridge, not in a bad way, but I have to get home to rest for 2 days before I then go to British Columbia, because I will be in Nanaimo for the BC Conservative AGM. If you're a delegate, come say hi. Obviously, I'm not a voting delegate because I'm not a BC resident. I'm from Alberta. But yeah, so I'll be still giving you my, on the floor, probably giving people my recommendations for who I like that's running for the different positions in the party. I think there are some people who are currently on the board who should stay. Some people I would like to see replaced by someone else. The BC Conservatives, the big thing that they have to not do in the next few years is think that we can slump back into being the BC United or BC Liberals. We can just say mild things on policy. Eventually, the BC NDP will mess up so hard that we'll be put into government. Maybe that's true. But also, is that really the noble thing to do? Is just go soft? That if someone says something untrue, you're not going to correct them because it might be politically incorrect to do so? Again, there is this grave hoax in Kamloops. It's a hoax. Nobody's saying that residential schools were actually good now. Obviously not. But warping the truth is not good. If anything, what it is trying to insult Indigenous people, because it says if an Indigenous person backs a false claim, it must make it true because we're too scared to say it's wrong. Even though most Indigenous people know it's basically a hoax. They have the same opinions that the vast majority of Canadians do, who can read a newspaper and say, yeah, well, that was silly. That's what we need to be doing. So I do congratulate Dallas Brody for pushing back on that, basically highlighting false information and then using it to push for a leftist agenda should be called out. And because it's uncomfortable to do so in the short term, doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, because it will have long-term benefits, being the party who says correct things and doesn't back off of them. If you're scared of saying correct things in politics, by the way, leave. And there are people who, I'm a truth teller, and they make that their entire personality, and they don't really say true things. They just say things that they agree with. I'm saying that if you know you're right, the data is there. You're not even having to stretch the data to make your point. This is the perfect case. They literally haven't found any bodies yet. Could they? Technically, yes. But after $8 million being spent on this case and they haven't recovered anything, I'm guessing the answer is probably no. And if you can't back the idea that nothing's been found because that's uncomfortable, then leave politics, because you're obviously not equipped for it. Or at least you're not actually conservative and you should go join a lefty party. Anyways, so that's it for me today, guys. I'll see you guys all later.